The mayor of Eagle Pass told my colleague down at the border today, and the mayor is a Democrat, by the way, that the border is not being effectively managed, and asked the president to come and see it. Does the president have any plans to go to the border?
I don't have any plans to preview at this point in time. Certainly we're open to it, but no plans to preview.
Is it something he would consider doing before the Summit of the Americas, where he's set to meet with the leaders of Central and South America, see the situation firsthand before having that robust conversation?
Well, he's meeting with leaders of countries that he's traveled to many times, and certainly is very familiar with the issues that will be discussed, which is addressing root causes, coordinating, whether it's on the economic front or security front, and that's an initiative he led during when he was vice president. So he's very familiar with those issues.
On the economy, Austin Goolsbee, the former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors under the Obama administration, said that he felt that the president yesterday in his comments about the GDP report was potentially underplaying the risks of a recession. And he pointed to geopolitical conditions with Ukraine, with Russia cutting off gas to Europe, and also the GDP shrinking, saying that people should be nervous. How do you respond to that?
Well, I have a great deal of respect for Austin Goolsbee. He's a former colleague, and so does the president. But what we look at is a range of economic data, including economic data that was in the GDP numbers yesterday, which I did some explaining of yesterday. But some of the data that was in there show very encouraging signs that economists look at. Many independent economists monitor closely. American consumer spending, business investment, residential investment, all up. The decrease as it relates to exports is largely because our economy is stronger than many economies around the world, and the inventory numbers, which is kind of the number that went down, that brought it down, is in large part because the fourth quarter inventory numbers were the highest in history, and these numbers are done as a comparison from quarter to quarter. So I think we felt it was important to explain the data and what it means. We continue to monitor economic data. It's important to note that some important components of it are we created more jobs last year than any job in American history. We're at a very low unemployment rate, and while costs are high and inflation is not where we want it to be, the Federal Reserve continues to project that will come down by the end of the year. So our economists and our economic team continues to feel confident in the strength of the economy, even as we monitor a range of data.
Jennifer Granholm said something, though, that was interesting about inflation coming down. She said some economists are suggesting inflation is going to level off a bit, but it's just so hard to know because we don't know what's going to happen on the war on this. So she's seeming to also allude to geopolitical conditions that might not result in these projections coming to fruition.
Well, the Federal Reserve makes the official projections, right, for the government. What I will note, and I think maybe she was referring to, is even the new economic data we saw today, energy accounted for 61% of the reasoning for the increase in the inflation numbers. And we know that because of Putin's unprovoked invasion in Ukraine, that it's driving food costs, but also energy costs, and that is a huge driver. So that's why the president is taking a range of steps. The historic release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, even the steps, certainly smaller as it relates to E15 today, to work to really target and focus on energy prices and costs. And
I have just a couple questions on the Disinformation Board.
Sure.
Yesterday you had told me that you were not familiar with Nina Jankowicz. I'm wondering if you have more information on her today. Also, Secretary Mayorkas said that he was not familiar with statements that she had made surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop. And I'm just wondering, how was she hired if you in the White House are not familiar with her, if Mayorkas is not familiar with her statements? What's the process for putting her into a position like this? Who's in charge of her hiring?
Well, let me give you a sense of who she is. She's an expert on online disinformation. She was formerly in the Wilson Center's she was formerly a disinformation fellow at the Wilson Center. She's testified before Congress as well as the United Kingdom and European parliaments, advised a Ukrainian foreign minister, particularly relevant in this moment, under the auspices of a Fulbright Public Policy Fellowship, and overseeing Russia and Belarus programs at the National Democratic Institute. Any hiring decisions are up to the Department of Homeland Security, but this is a person with extensive qualifications. What I will tell you about the board and what the board is doing, this is a continuation of work that began at the Department of Homeland Security in 2020 under former President Trump.
Is it, though, I guess, can you describe what her job is going to be? Because there's been some TikToks that she has put out, and it seems like rather than calling balls and strikes on this story is false and this story and here's the truth on it, one line stood out to me. They're laundering disinfo. We should really take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice, or vote. So
well, here's what the board is going to do, which I think is of particular interest. Again, a continuation of the work of the former president. So for anyone who's critical of it, I didn't hear them being critical of the work under the former president, which is just interesting to note contextually. But in the fact sheet that they put out, what they noted yesterday, what they noted in there is that this is meant to, one, the first bullet was about protecting privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties, and the First Amendment. They said the primary mission is to establish best practices to ensure that efforts to understand and respond to disinformation are done in ways that protect privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. I'd also note that the first example they gave about what they're going to do is support the Department of Homeland Security's ongoing work back to the former administration to address how and understand how misinformation spread by human smugglers that prey on vulnerable populations attempting to migrate to the United States. There's no question, everybody, that bipartisan support for that, to address disinformation that's helping smugglers, helping people migrate, or providing false information, prompting people to migrate. This is also work that is helping to address unauthorized terrorism, other threats, and see how disinformation and misinformation is being pushed to lead to increase those. So that's all work. We think is work that's been ongoing for some time. This is the form it's taking, and there's a fact sheet that details the specifics of it.
You just outlined a lot of efforts that sound very worthy, but you've got someone from the Department of Homeland Security telling people how they should vote. How do you explain that to critics who say that doesn't sound right to me?
This is an individual who will be overseeing the work of that board. Personnel decisions are up to the Department of Homeland Security. I just outlined the extensive history and background this individual has, but I think what's important to note here is what the board is doing, which is continuing what is important disinformation-related work that began under the former administration.